Welcome back. This is Focus on Africa. Now, Africa's development ambitions face a massive funding shortfall, and it affects everything from power to internet speeds. Nados Bekele-Thomas, the CEO for NEPAD, the development agency of the African Union, says that the continent faces a $3 trillion financing gap for its development plans. Now, you probably feel that gap through power cuts, slower internet, and stalled opportunities. And that's why Bekele-Thomas insists that relying on aid simply isn't enough. The investment gap is too large. But here's the problem. The African continent gets only 5% of the infrastructure financing that is available globally. So what does Africa need to build a pipeline of credible, bankable projects? And how do young people benefit from an investment-led future? We'll go into those questions in just a moment. But first, let's hear from Nados Bekele-Thomas, the CEO of NEPAD.
Given the principle of African solutions, for Africa, and self-sufficiency being the driver, in the principles of the AU, what we are trying to do is make sure that we work with the development finance. Putting the finance and development together is one of the things that we have succeeded. And therefore, in order to do that, not one bank can be able to support the $3 trillion that we need to meet our second 10-year implementation plan. Just infrastructure is $170 billion a year, agriculture $100 billion, health $50 billion. All these they're not just figures, but they really require a very intentional resource mobilization.
How does this rhetoric marry with what we've been hearing from African leaders talking about self-reliance and talking about how Africa must stand on its own?
There is no single country in the world that could be self-reliant. But, it's the way we package it, it's the way we make it to be attractive to private sector. We cannot do a public sector, a government cannot function unless it expands its economy. We have to expand the economy, and that's how we can generate resources. And in order to expand your economy, you have to put as many stakeholders in the economy. That's where the youth and women, integrating them in the productive sector is critical. And once you have that, then you can mobilize. The fiscal space will be expanded, right? With our pension fund, with our sovereign wealth fund, okay, with remittances, if there is an investable product, then all this could be attracted. The fact is that no one wants to just come and give money, because that's waste, that's expenditure. But if they're going to invest in something, then that will really give them resources, and they will get dividends out of that.
So, with these grim numbers, what does a shift from aid dependency actually mean for the African continent's growth? Well, I asked Ama Jampo, who's the Chief Executive Officer of the Ghana Venture Capital and Private Equity Association, also known as GVCA.
So how do we innovate in the way that we are looking at finance from the traditional models that we've seen, in terms of aid coming in terms of the types of grants that we receive, in terms of the kinds of, even the investments that we actually structure and put out in the market. So, in Ghana alone, we've seen a recent success story of a fund that was launched primarily through domestic pension funds. And so it's a $75 million fund launched by a female fund manager who is really providing the capital that other fund managers need to create investment opportunities for young entrepreneurs to seek the funding, the long-term funding, the patient capital that's required to actually grow and expand their innovative businesses. And so we've seen a shift towards, grants and philanthropists coming in for really short-term, narrowly focused projects to them becoming partners with those who are on the ground, the local experts, the local expertise that exists that can actually structure and are successfully structuring and designing new ways of financing our private sector. But we can't expand job creation for our young people without long-term patient capital that is affordable.
What more can governments or institutions do to make investments easier and, of course, more predictable for young innovators?
It's a multi-pronged approach. On the policy front, we certainly advocate for the lowering of the bottlenecks and barriers. So, the legal frameworks that we need to actually encourage domestic capital to flow to our young people and their enterprises. The fiscal and tax incentives that need to be put in place. We see a lot of focus on foreign direct investment and incentives for them, but what about our domestic capital mobilization, our local investors and experts who are on the ground? They also need the support, the incentives. Our regulatory providers need help as well in terms of capacity, and also, working together with investors, local and international, to ensure that we have a very stable regulatory environment as well. And I think all of those touch points, the ecosystem, the fiscal, the legal, and the policy frameworks come together to ensure that we have a really robust support mechanism for the young people who have the potential to create these huge businesses that would ultimately create the jobs that we need to see and plug that financing gap.
Where does Africa's resources, its gold, its oil, its minerals come into all this? And how can they be better utilized for development?
I do think that we need to be intentional about creating space for building our businesses, our domestic businesses. We all know the history of Africa being very much export driven and being some kind of a department store for people in other nations to extract from. And so we need to really look at how we are going to address the fundamentals of our economies, how we look at our different supply chains, our value chains, and really find ways to mobilize the capital that we do raise from our pensions, from our mineral resources, to really streamline some of these elements that can be put in place to encourage and incentivize and unlock some of our own talent and our entrepreneurial pursuits